Welcome to Take 5, your 5-minute inspirational message from Solid Rock Drogheda. Naomi Osaka has been in the news lately. She's a Japanese tennis player. A very unusual name, of course, that a Japanese person would have a Christian name. Of course, most Japanese people would be of the Shinto or the Buddhist religion. And so to have people that are in Japan with a Christian name is actually quite rare. She is named after Naomi in the Bible. And one of the reasons is because she comes from mixed parentage. Her father was from Haiti and her mother is Japanese. And she was born in Japan, but has been raised for most of her life and lived in the United States. And as such, she plays her tennis for Japan, and she's greatly beloved by the Japanese public, which actually is very rare because the Japanese nation as a whole is not generally accepting of immigration or racial diversity within their nation. However, she's been very successful. She's the number 2 ranked player in the world, has been number 1 in the past. She's the current US and Australian Open champion. And last year, 2020, she had the highest earnings ever by a female athlete in a single year, over $40 million. She's overcome adversity. Her first major triumph was quite a controversial experience because Serena Williams actually had a controversy with the court referee and the line judge and all that kind of thing. There was lots of booing at the match and everything else. Quite a traumatic experience for a young woman to be winning her first title. Well, in the last week, she was playing at the French Open, and she announced that she would not be doing interviews after her matches because she wanted to safeguard her mental health. Now, it's part of the contracts for the tennis players that when they play their matches, they give interviews afterwards. But she said, no, I need to guard my mental health. And she was subsequently fined by the organisers of the French Open. And she was warned that there would be further sanctions unless she did the interviews, and she might even be expelled from the tournament. She actually withdrew from the competition, but not before the journalist Piers Morgan had savaged her online and written an article condemning her for, I quote, exploiting her mental health to avoid criticism. And yes, that is the same Piers Morgan who stormed off a TV show in an absolute rage because somebody criticized him. However, she withdrew from the competition, and in doing so, she described the long battles that she's been having with depression. And I say, good for you, Naomi Osaka. You know, number one, you're brave enough to talk about your mental health issues, and that takes a lot of courage. There is still a stigma in many people's eyes attached to having any kind of mental illness or mental health struggle. And so I believe Naomi Osaka should be congratulated for being able to speak out openly the way she has. I also say good for you, Naomi Osaka, because you have been sensible enough to prioritize your mental health. Even though it has caused you to lose out on money, upon respect in your sport from your peers and so many other things, you have realized that you need to prioritize your mental health. And that, again, is a brave and a good and a sensible and wise thing to do. But also, this whole thing with Naomi Osaka is a reminder to us that mental health and mental health issues, that can affect any one of us. You know, sometimes we think that's just for people who are weak or people who are failing in life. But here we have a young woman at the peak of physical condition, at the peak of success in her sport, and amazingly wealthy and successful. And yet she still is struggling with mental health issues because this is something that can affect anybody. You know, I mentioned about her bravery in being able to talk about it. There was a time when people didn't feel able to talk about mental health issues. I remember as a child listening to my grandfather tell me stories about how whenever he was kept in what was then termed a lunatic asylum in England, and he was subjected against his will to mental shock treatment, And I can remember my grandmother, when she heard what he was saying to me, hushing him up and telling him he shouldn't say such things in front of children because it wasn't right to talk about such things. But I'm glad my granddad did, because these are issues that we should all be aware of, and nobody should be afraid to speak out about it. And even if an online bully like Piers Morgan gets offended because a successful, empowered woman of colour talks about her mental health issues, even if these online bullies begin to kick out, we should still be able to talk about these things. And I am impressed by Naomi Osaka in this last week. But as this can be an issue that can affect any of us, this can affect Christians as well. And we should never see it as a sign of weakness. We should never see it as something that carries a stigma or something we should not talk about. Instead, we should encourage one another and pray for one another just as much as we would with anybody with a physical health issue rather than a mental health issue. I pray that if you are struggling in any of these areas, that you would talk to somebody, that you would get the help and the advice that you need, and you would turn to the Lord and ask for his strength as well. May God bless you today, and please join us again tomorrow for another Take 5, your 5-minute inspirational message from Solid Rock Drogheda.